Biogeochemical cycles. Elements and compounds move between living and non-living forms through the biogeochemical cycles. The key cycles that support life are water, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. The water cycle. Water is essential to living organisms. As we can see in this diagram, we have water in the ocean, we have water in the atmosphere as clouds, we have water in lakes, we have water in glacier mountain caps, we have water in the runoff that comes off of those mountains, and we have water in the ground as well. Click on the picture above to watch a video about the water cycle. The water cycle. Most water molecules are taken up into the clouds by evaporation and transpiration. The water returns to the oceans, lands, and lakes by precipitation. Water that enters the soil returns to the oceans through runoff. So as we can see in this diagram, transpiration is when the leaves of the plants release the water, and the water becomes a gas water vapor, and then moves back up into the atmosphere. Eventually it condenses, so it forms more of a liquid in the sky, liquid droplets, and when there's enough condensation and ice crystals form, the water forms droplets and it falls back down to the earth through precipitation. And then whatever water we have in the lakes and oceans may evaporate again, go back up into the atmosphere, and so forth. The cycle continues. The carbon cycle. In this diagram, we see how carbon moves through the biosphere and where it's stored. In the atmosphere, there is about 750 gigatons in carbon. That's what these black numbers are, gigatons in carbon. And then the purple numbers represent the carbon moving from one place to another. So for example, 121.3 gigatons in carbon is captured by the plants through photosynthesis, and 5.5 gigatons in carbon is burned off from the fossil fuels and put back into the atmosphere. Click the picture above to watch a video about the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle. In summary, most carbon is found in the atmosphere. Carbon is used by plants to form sugars, which are eaten by animals. Carbon is recycled to the atmosphere by cellular respiration, and human activities like burning of fossil fuels also release carbon into the atmosphere. The nitrogen cycle. Most nitrogen is found as a gas in the atmosphere, but this form is unavailable for protein synthesis. Bacteria in the soil make nitrogen compounds from atmospheric nitrogen so that it can be used by plants and animals. This is called nitrogen fixation. The nitrogen cycle. In this summary diagram of the nitrogen cycle, bacteria fix atmospheric nitrogen, or N2, into ammonia, NH3, or ammonium, NH4. Then other bacteria will convert the ammonia into nitrates, NO3-, or nitrites, NO2-. Producers will use these nitrogenous compounds to make proteins. Then consumers eat the producers and reuse the nitrogen to make their own proteins. Oftentimes the proteins from the plants will be broken down into amino acids, and then the consumers will use those amino acids to make their own proteins. When organisms die, decomposers release nitrogen into the soil and atmosphere via denitrification. Denitrification is the opposite process of nitrogen fixation. In denitrification, we're taking those nitrogenous compounds and we're breaking it down into atmospheric nitrogen once again. And then the cycle continues. The phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus cycle is unique from the carbon and nitrogen cycles because phosphorus never exists as a gas. Phosphorus can float in the atmosphere as dust, but it's never actually in a gas form. Phosphorus enters the biosphere. It is uptaken by plants when it is soluble. When the phosphorus compounds are dissolved in water as soluble phosphorus, the plants will uptake that soluble phosphorus, incorporate it into their tissues as DNA and RNA, and then at that point it is available to the consumers. When the consumers produce fecal matter or die, that phosphorus can be returned back to the soil, and then used as nutrients for the plants again, so there's cycling there too. We can have the phosphorus be recycled in the biosphere, or we can have new phosphorus enter the biosphere from the inorganic compounds found in rocks. The phosphorus cycle. Most phosphorus is stored in the form of inorganic phosphate within rocks and sediment until they eventually wear down and release the phosphate. Phosphate molecules can be washed into rivers, streams, and eventually the ocean where they are used by marine organisms. Phosphate that remains in the soil is absorbed into plants that convert them into organic compounds to be useful in living organisms.